Welcome to this week's Session Spotlight. I'm Paige Taylor. Bills have made their way to the opposite chamber than they originated in and are being heard in committee before they make their way to the floor again at the Oklahoma State Capitol. There is both a House and Senate bill to ban cell phones in Oklahoma public schools, and they both advanced in the legislative process this week. It's something a handful of states have already done, including these. And Oklahoma could be next. Both bills that have been filed aim to do the same thing, and the same two legislators authored both of them. However, there are slight differences. Both House Bill 1276 and Senate Bill 139 would instruct school districts to adopt a policy prohibiting students' use of cell phones while at school. The House version allows school districts to opt out of adopting a policy to prohibit cell phone use on a yearly basis. The Senate version would require school districts to adopt a policy for the 2025-2026 school year, and then the districts would be able to decide whether they want to adopt a policy every year after that. The bills do offer exceptions for health and emergency situations. This is an issue State Senator Allie Seifert has been working on for years, and she is the Senate author on both of the bills. State Representative Chad Caldwell is the House author on both bills. One lawmaker in the Senate Education Committee this past week raised concerns about the timeline for implementation should a cell phone ban pass.
Because if this is adopted, then ultimately it would go into effect in July, and school boards would be required to have something, a policy approved before the school year, which would be August. So help me understand how that works.
This has an emergency clause that would be effective July 1. I don't think it will come as a surprise to any school board in this state or any administrator in the state that something was coming this year. And so while they might only officially have June to August to enact that policy, I've spoken with so many districts and they've enacted something or we're talking about it. And so this isn't like we just dropped it in the dead of night and it's a new subject that hasn't been talked about for 2 years. So they have officially 2 months, but I think the conversations have been developing over the last 18 months that we've been talking about this issue.
Seifert also said she thinks getting cell phones out of the classroom is the most important thing the legislature can do for education this year.
I just want to say thank you for your engagement on this issue. Many of you on discussions when I was whipping the Senate bill on the floor discussed the need for local control. I think this is the ultimate compromise, and so I want to thank the House author for his work on this. We've been working together really well, and so I think this is really, really important, and probably the most important thing we can do for education this year is help get the cell phones out of the classrooms, give our districts the cover that they need to do something that could be a little hard and a little bit challenging.
Lawmakers are still in the process of figuring out what they are going to do about wind turbine setback requirements in Oklahoma. The setback requirement would establish how far away a wind turbine could be constructed from someone's property. But here's the differences in what the House wants and what the Senate wants. The House would like to see a setback requirement of a half a mile away, while the Senate would rather see the setback requirement be a quarter mile away. I sat in on the House Energy Committee this week where the Senate version of the bill was presented to representatives. Here's what State Representative Brad Bowles and House Speaker Kyle Hilbert had to say.
We've had a lot of discussion on wind setback policy in Oklahoma this past month or two. What I will say about Senate Bill 2 is it's not our final language. We still are in negotiation with the Senate. They have our bill that we passed, which we're working with them on that language as well, trying to get a compromise between both chambers. I will say on record, we do not have a compromise between both chambers at this point, but what I would like to ask to members, I'll explain the bill in just 1 second, but I want you to take in consideration that this is still a conversation. What I'm going to ask of the committee is if you would give us trust to buy more time to continue those conversations. If the bill passes today, it goes to oversight within the next 2 weeks, which I'm the chairman of. I'm willing to, on record, strike the title. Once it gets in oversight, we can't do it at this point because of our process, but we would in oversight. And so that's my promise to the committee, that we would strike title before the next committee to buy more time. But what this bill particularly does is it sets a quarter-mile setback from the residence as well as a quarter-mile setback from the property boundary. And it also allows for the waiver. So if a neighbor wants to waive their setback with the energy company, the wind company, they would have the ability to do that as well, just like in our bill. But this would be a statewide setback, no threshold. But as I mentioned, at the end of the day, this is all part of a conversation that we're trying to continue. And so I would just ask for the committee for your patience and your faith that we'll work through this process and give us a couple more weeks to get that done.
Representative Bowles and I, we went over to the Pro Tem's office to visit with the Senate and continued conversations about this bill. I agree with everything that Chairman Bowles mentioned. This bill does have some things we need to improve about it. I much prefer the House version of the bill. They did commit to giving a hearing to the House version of this legislation, but Representative Bowles and I did commit to doing what we could to help keep this bill alive through the process so we could continue to have a vehicle and then make changes as necessary, and as he said, to commit to strike title. And so I'll be supporting this today.
Oklahoma Power Alliance Executive Director Mark Yates released this statement whenever these wind turbine bills were first being debated on the floor, saying, quote, Oklahoma's power generation market is one of the most competitive in the country, and the low-cost, reliable energy it provides is one of our state's strongest economic development tools. Carving out different regulations for different areas of the state creates an unfair playing field and goes against the core values of personal freedom and private property rights that so many Oklahomans hold dearly. If these unnecessary government mandates become law, they will drive up energy costs to Oklahomans and hurt our state's competitiveness, end quote. A couple of bills were also heard in committee this week that would impact the number of days Oklahoma students in public schools are in the classroom. Two bills that have already passed in the Senate were heard in the House Education Committee this week, and both advanced. One would limit the number of virtual days in Oklahoma. Senate Bill 758 states that beginning in the 2026-2027 school year, public schools would be able to count only 2 virtual days or 12 hours toward their 180-day or 1,080-hour requirement. If the state superintendent has approved the district's virtual instruction plan, the governor has issued a state of emergency, and the school district board approves the use of a virtual day.
We've got a lot of schools that are trying to use virtual days as a way to get to 4-day learning. I'll be honest, I've had a lot of conversations with superintendents around the state that are very upset about that, because the reality is a lot of these kids are going home with no access to any teacher, no access to learning. There are school districts that had 43 days or more virtual days last year. That is not a way to increase the education of our students. That is not a way to increase the outcomes in our state. Our kids need, as you know better than anyone, our kids need that instructional time in order to truly feel like they're invested in and to learn and grow. And so that's the aim of this bill.
Another bill that advanced out of the committee would add an instructional day to school districts' calendars if the legislature appropriates at least $25 million more to the State Department of Education for public schools for a fiscal year than they did the year prior. That means if $25 million more was appropriated every year over the next 10 years, 10 days would be added over that time period.
This is one where I'm going to have to trust our education partners and our district leaders. If you want to just check the box and get through with something, you can probably game the system. If you care about your kids and want to prioritize their education, then you're going to do the right thing for it. And again, I think the senator's perspective is, if we're going to invest a significant sum of money, at least $25 million, we should ask that our schools spend some more time with our kids and increase their instruction time.
And that's your session spotlight. Check out my Capitol reports every Monday through Thursday on Fox 25. I also provide a look ahead at what bills will be heard on Sundays. For even more in-depth coverage, go to OKCFox.com.